Welcome back to Kryptolytix, giving you a fresh take on crypto analytics. Today, I'm going to talk about NFTs on the Bitcoin blockchain, as well as a few other NFT related things, but that's the main topic we're going to talk about today. So let's get straight into it. Okay, so there's some news about Bitcoin NFTs. So this is actually NFTs on the Bitcoin blockchain. And that's basically what I'll be mostly covering today. So before I get into the video, I just wanted to give a quick shameless plug to my own NFT collection, which I've launched, which is the Kynomatix NFT collection. So this is a collection of my digital art. I've just minted a few at the moment. But at the moment they are on the Solana blockchain, and that's because it's my favorite. This is about 12 years worth of work, essentially, is in terms of getting this style developed. So I began this style back in 2012, I'm going to say, basically from taking photos and then manipulating them to create something completely different. And over the years, I've basically developed this technique, which has taken a long time to get here, but I have started listing them on Rarible, and I'll probably move them over to OpenSea, but I just have minted them through Rarible for the time being, and I'm getting quite a bit of interest on them, which is really cool. And so you'll probably hear a bit more about these in the future, but if you want to check out the collection or even my Instagram profile, which is where I am basically updating all the content for this stuff, then there'll be a link in the description below. But here is just a quick sample of what is to come. I've got many more where this came from, but these all take hours, sometimes days to make just the one, so I can't churn them out the way they can with PFPs of apes with pipes and sailors hats, unfortunately. But you know, that's kind of what happens when you do everything yourself, and none of this is AI generated either. This is all completely manual. So just thought I'd give that a quick plug before I continue. So I'll leave a link to the collection below. It'll be in the link tree, and in there you'll find all of the links to the OpenSea, Rarible, and Instagram pages. Now down to brass tacks, Bitcoin NFTs. So how did we get here? Good question. So basically just for a quick timeline, in 2017, the SegWit proposal was passed. And what it did was it increased the block size to 1 megabyte for the signatures, and then the transactions would sit in the 3 megabytes, basically. So that was a really big deal because it was part of the first step in Bitcoin's, or first major step in Bitcoin's scalability upgrades. I was around for that and following it pretty closely. Did quite a bit of research on it back then as well, just because I wanted to understand the Bitcoin blockchain more specifically on a detailed level. But the long and short of it was, it just kind of needed to be done to scale up because the transactions were getting greater, especially after the massive spike in interest in 2017 from the bull market of that year. So let's wind forward to 2021, and they implemented this Taproot feature. So Taproot was implemented and aims to make the Bitcoin network more secure, efficient, and private, allowing it to better meet the needs of users. So basically it's a scripting system upgrade. Taproot, main thing to consider with regards to the NFT side of things was it lifted the limit on size of operations at the input or transaction level. So the block size has increased, but the limit and size of operations has been lifted, which again is a scalability solution to the adoption that Bitcoin will be seeing over the coming years. So we can see the Taproot timeline here. Won't go into too many of the details, but long and short of it is it started in 2018 in January. The proposal was put out there, and then as you can see, we made all the way to the end of the bull market pretty much, which is when Taproot was activated. So that's interesting, actually. I don't know if everyone's talking about this. November was the end of the bull market, right? And that signaled the release of Taproot signaled the end of the bull market. and the release of SegWit, because that was in like November in 2017, signaled the end of that bull market. So that's interesting. I wouldn't really hold much to that, but hey, if there's any more major upgrades in the middle of a bull market, maybe it's time to sell your Bitcoin. Anyway, so just a couple of things here just to cover, I guess. I'm not going to go into too many of the specifics because you can look into this sort of stuff and there's a lot of great details out there, but for the sake of moving the video forward, I'm not going to cover too many of them. So there's been a few attempts in the past to scale Bitcoin for DeFi and NFTs. So Stacks is a pretty good example of this. Not too much has come to Bitcoin for some time. There are some products like Stacks which are trying to bring DeFi to Bitcoin, for example, and has Bitcoin NFTs, and they already have a bridge for bridging Ethereum NFTs to Bitcoin. The Stacks layer enables DeFi NFTs and other apps on Bitcoin. So it's basically a side chain, and they've got a few Medium articles. For example, they've got one here about how to bridge NFTs from ETH to Stacks. Stacks didn't gain too much traction in the last bull market. I was actually quite surprised. I thought maybe it would have done a lot better than what it did in the last bull run. So I was very surprised by that because the concept of DeFi on Bitcoin sounded pretty good, but I think the fact that it's a side chain made the adoption potential significantly lower because a lot of people don't really want to deal with extra chains, especially Maxis. Maxis generally won't even touch this sort of thing regardless, and I'll get into that a little bit more later with regards to the Bitcoin Maxis perspective on this whole situation. It's not the best, but Stacks has already implemented NFTs on the Bitcoin blockchain, but it didn't gain the biggest amount of traction. When you look at things like DeFi Llama, for example, you will see they have removed the NFT part of their website. So never mind that. That was pretty helpful when that worked, but I guess it doesn't anymore. But I think you'll probably find if you looked at the statistics, for example, CryptoSlam, if you had a look here, you won't even see them in the list, basically, when it comes to NFT volume. So that just kind of goes to show they never quite made their way in, so it didn't quite have the appeal that I guess people were hoping for with regards to NFTs on Bitcoin. So let's talk about Ordinals and Inscriptions. Cut to today, or maybe the last week or so, couple of weeks, Casey Rodarmer has basically developed a way to mint NFTs on the Bitcoin blockchain. And there's a few things that he created in order to do this, and we'll talk about them right here. So they are Ordinals and Inscriptions. Ordinals Inscriptions can store data on the blockchain as the limit was lifted by Taproot. They are stored directly on the chain. So this is a feature or bug not a feature of Taproot, in that it's allowed him to be able to create these two components that allowed individual Satoshis to become NFTs. Now, one Bitcoin is 100 million Satoshis. So this little picture illustrates maybe 100 million Satoshis. But yes, one Bitcoin is broken up into 100 million Satoshis, which right now is pretty crazy. But if Bitcoin's ever worth like $1 million, then that becomes a little bit easier to manage. But at the moment, things are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Satoshis. So still a very small bite of Bitcoin data, if you will. But in the future, things might end up costing one Satoshi. Who knows? We don't know what's going to happen in the future, but this is kind of one of the thought patterns behind it anyway. So, ordinal theory. It makes Satoshis non-fungible and can be more rare than others. So in the case of NFTs, generally there's different rates that make some NFTs more rare than others, whereas before all Satoshis were considered to be the same. Ordinals have turned Bitcoin into a huge NFT collection made up of 2.1 quadrillion NFTs. called Satoshis. And each Satoshi is given an ordinal number or a serial number when they are mined, and you can add JPEGs to them, but they can only be static images. Inscriptions allow you to track and trade individual Satoshis and attach data like an image or a link to give it a unique attribute. So this is the core foundation and fundamentals behind how this has been made possible to actually store NFTs on the Bitcoin blockchain, not just a side chain like Stacks or anything like that. And it utilizes the Lightning Network to do it. Now, what's the difference between ETH and Bitcoin NFTs? Well, on ETH, most JPEGs are stored on IPFS, for example, and just point to some storage location. So it's possible, say, in like 50 years' time, there's a chance that they'll no longer exist. Solana, for example, stores NFTs on-chain. You can also use services like Arweave to store off-chain, which is one of the reasons why Solana has become so popular as an NFT chain. It's because being able to store the NFTs directly on chain is a lot better than them being stored somewhere and just a link pointing to it. Because if, like, say that wherever it's stored goes down, for example, then that NFT is kind of lost forever. So it's a bit of a problem. And it's one of the reasons why I've stored my NFTs on the Solana blockchain, is because my images are 8,000 by 8,000. A lot of them are 8,000 by 8,000 pixels. So they end up being about 50 megabytes. There's a lot of small nuanced detail that you wouldn't get to see otherwise. So for example, take this image here. This is Shanghai #1. I can actually open the original image here and look on the blockchain. So this is stored on the Solana blockchain. This one's not the full 8,000 resolution, but it's still very high res. So you can actually have a look here at all these tiny little details in this image that is all stored on the blockchain. And this image is pretty big. This one's about 12 megabytes. And so this would not fit on the Bitcoin blockchain. And a lot of my other ones are about 50 megabytes. So it just would not fit the way I want it to, because I want people to be able to download these, print them, do whatever they want with them. So having all that extra resolution means that they can do a lot more with them than, say, like a tiny little JPEG. So being able to store it on chain and at high file size is why I much prefer Solana chain. But back to the Bitcoin blockchain concept, this is still able to store it on chain. So it means there's a better degree of permanence there, less likely to run into issues later on down the track with art kind of just disappearing because of hosting services going down, for example, or something like this. I guess one of the examples you could think of here is there are a lot of crazy images and stuff already stored on the Bitcoin blockchain that have been there for many years. So there's even Bitcoin punks, but it was always very clunky to try and mint NFTs or store images on the blockchain before, but now it's so much easier. One thing to keep in mind, there's a major difference, is there are no collections on the Bitcoin blockchain. So for example, with Bored Apes, you have the Bored Ape Yacht Club, which is a full collection of the Bored Apes, and each individual ape is a Bored Ape. So it's just individual NFTs on the Bitcoin blockchain, not full collections. Hasn't been anything yet to indicate whether that will come later. It might be something contained within the marketplace, but not recognized by the chain. For example, with Ethereum or Solana, they have full collections. For example, with this, you can see this is part of the Kynomatix NFT collection, right? And each individual NFT is an individual NFT as part of the collection. So that's something that's lacking as well. And the other thing is each mint is paid by the creator rather than the NFT collector. Well, I do that anyway. I mint my own NFTs and then put them on the market. But the difference is that Solana's gas fees is next to nothing. Bitcoin is pretty cheap at the moment too. When I was testing out the LB wallet, which I'll cover in a minute, the Bitcoin transaction fee was like 14 cents. So it wasn't really that much, but during high congestion periods and high transaction periods, that fee can become a lot more. And while at the moment during the bear market, or at least maybe the accumulation phase, don't know what phase you want to say we're in at the moment, I'd say this is probably accumulation phase after the dreaded bear, then it's probably a good time to be doing this sort of stuff. But later during the bull market, it might become very expensive, especially if there is a Bitcoin NFT bull market, which this could definitely bring on as people try to get in early on this. But it could also spark bull runs on NFT markets on both Ethereum and Solana, Polygon, and all these other chains as well. So rising tide, floating all boats, I guess is the concept here, right? But each mint being paid by the creator means that it's probably less likely that you'll get a lot of 1,000, 10,000 mint NFTs, just because it would be very expensive for the creators. It's not an issue for people like myself who just create art and then sell it as NFTs. But for those who are minting thousands upon thousands of these things with all these different traits and stuff like that, it would get pretty expensive. Whereas with Ethereum, the collector is the one that pays the fees. So I guess the interesting thing about this is that it brings Bitcoin closer to Ethereum, for example, with regards to the use cases of it. Now, again, there are two sides of this argument, and I'm going to cover both of them because I like to be objective. But there currently aren't any other narratives on Bitcoin apart from ultrasound money, which is also an Ethereum narrative, store of value, all that sort of stuff. So this kind of gives a few more use cases to Bitcoin, which is kind of cool. But there are no actual use cases for these NFTs, you have to keep in mind. So I think this is better for people like myself, like pure artists who just want to mint their art to the blockchain, because there's no staking, there is no smart contract based features that you get on, say, Solana or Ethereum or anything like that. So it won't be good for games, it won't be good for all these sorts of things where you get extra features from the NFTs. So because there aren't any smart contracts yet on Bitcoin, and Jack Dorsey is working on something, Mr. Twitter is working on smart contracts, I believe, for Bitcoin. That was something that was spoken about last year at the very least. Just for the time being, then it's just art and capped at 4 megabytes, which is alright. I mean, most people can still see a decent amount of detail at 4 megabytes, but it kind of limits what you can do after you have the actual art yourself. Like if you want to print like a massive print of it and put it on your wall, then you're kind of limited with how much you can blow it up, which I guess is probably not that big a deal. If you're just a digital art collector, then that probably doesn't even really matter. But yeah, it's just something worth considering, is that there aren't any additional features. With this, it's just raw image storing, essentially. Now here's the Maxi case. This is a Bitcoin Maxi here. See this angry dude right here. And the Bitcoin Maxi case, I suppose there would be other arguments as well, but this is kind of my summary of the Bitcoin Maxi case, is that the Bitcoin network might get crowded with NFT transactions, which may impact its primary use case as a medium of exchange and use for monetary transactions. So I think that's probably the biggest one. Now I'll cover the potential for bloat in the next slide, but I guess there's definitely some merit to that, in that if Bitcoin's going to be tackling large cross-border transactions and doing basically what it's meant to do, I suppose, then yes, I could see if this gains enough hype and traction, then it could affect transaction speeds for smaller transactions. But you have to keep in mind that larger transactions will just front run those by paying extra fees. I've done it before. When I've been impatient, I've bumped my fees up beyond what my wallet said was necessary, because I just wanted to get in front of the line. And I think these other large transactions will do the very same thing. So these NFT transactions will probably get put on the back burner during these high transaction throughput periods. So that is my counter argument to that. They're also concerned about the block space being wasted by JPEGs. I guess that's kind of fair enough. The other thing as well is, back to the transaction throughput, is over the last 18 months, blocks have been at 75 to 80% utilization. So any marginal increase in block space demand from a JPEG isn't really going to impact the monetary transactions, which is just, I guess, a bit more further elaboration on what I was just saying before. If it becomes popular, then it could create a backlog of these monetary transactions in the mempool. Again, I think this is like probably the primary thing that the Maxis will be sort of going for. Also, a lot of Bitcoin Maxis just hate the concept of NFTs and they wouldn't touch it, because to them the concept of NFTs is just doesn't make any sense. Whereas I guess as an artist, I personally love the concept of them, because you can get paid for your art in ways that you've never been able to before. So it's a difference of opinion, that's for sure. Though, from what I can tell, I'd say the Bitcoin mining community would be all for this, because think more transactions means more fee revenue. So I think that at least the miners will probably support it. I think because it really can't hurt from the miner's perspective, adding more use cases to Bitcoin and creating more potential for transactions. So I think they would be in favor of this, personally. Bitcoin Maxis, I think, would compare this to uploading JPEGs to the transaction ledger on your bank statement, which I guess to them would just be like, why would you want to do that? It doesn't make any sense, but it can be done. And further to what I was saying before, is due to block size limits, those transactions can take up entire blocks, which they're probably concerned with, that usually you can store quite a few transactions in one block, whereas, you might be mining a block and it just passes every 10 minutes and it just passes through a JPEG or a cluster of lower resolution JPEGs. There aren't really any standards for this yet, so maybe if they made a size limit or something like that so they could fit more JPEGs through. I'm not really sure. It's early days. This is on the bleeding edge of tech development. So to be honest, we're still in uncharted territory with regards to this. NFTs in general is kind of uncharted territory, but this is very much uncharted territory for the Bitcoin chain. But I guess, again, my primary criticism comes back down to the size limit of the images on the chain. So my counter argument for this, and I already covered this in some brief detail before, is that with each block size limit being 4 megabytes, it limits the size of the image. So it's less likely to cause bloat to the chain. Each individual block is still capped. So you can't put unlimited number of inscriptions in a block. Ordinals haven't even made any changes here. And as I mentioned before, as fees go up, the minting of NFTs will slow down and high value transactions will likely pay extra to prioritize themselves. The plus side here is this may actually drive more interest to Bitcoin, as it gives it more of a use case rather than just sound money, store of value, or other means of financial transactions. And I suspect there's a good chance in the future more things like this will be developed. For example, DeFi on Bitcoin Direct just through the Lightning Network, or NFTs, or all these sorts of things. I predict that, and I guess the fear here is that it will make other chains irrelevant, but I still believe the other chains will still have relevance in the future. But I predict a lot more stuff will be coming to the Bitcoin chain, the native chain, because it'll just take time for more scalability solutions to be built on top of the chain to pass transactions through, like, for example, Lightning Network, a bit like, your Arbitrums and your Optimisms and all that sort of stuff on the Ethereum chain, is side chains and layer 2s that allow for a lot more stuff to take place on the actual chain, basically collecting all the transactions and then sending them in one hit rather than individually clogging the network. I suspect more things like this will happen in the future for Bitcoin anyway. And it's always been a fear of mine, being a altcoin, not really maxi, but enthusiast, is if Bitcoin can basically take over and do everything that all the altcoins are doing, then what is the point of the altcoins? So this could be the first step towards that as potential, but I don't have that much confidence in that being a problem, but it's a consideration nevertheless. So how can one participate in this potential revolution of the Lightning Network and the Bitcoin blockchain? If you get the LB wallet, ALBY, it's a Chrome extension, you can participate in some of these projects. So this is the Lightning ecosystem. So this is a soft wallet akin to, say, MetaMask or Phantom. And this gives you access to websites like, for example, NOSFT or NOSFT. I'm sure it's NOSFT potentially, or NOSFT, whatever it is. So from here, you can basically connect your LB wallet. So the LB wallet, just like any soft wallet, just sits up here, and you can connect to any site that has the ability to do it, akin to any Ethereum dApp or a Solana dApp, for example. And this is basically what you will need in order to participate in minting some of these NFTs. Like, for example, one of the first ones available is the Astral Babes, which is the first Bitcoin native NFT collection minted as Ordinal Inscriptions via Lightning, straight to your Nostr pub. So you can see here, I mean, this is like their first custom one that they've made on Bitcoin. On Discord, might be worth checking out their spaces from February 8th, which was yesterday. And yeah, see what they're up to. They currently are not minting right now. They stopped at 420. There's 421 though, so I guess that new one was the 421. This must be the 421st, because when I was looking before it said 420. So I guess they are into this sort of stuff. But anyway, so the max supply will be 10,000, but I'm guessing because they have to pay for each mint themselves, they are waiting for maybe some of the commissions for it being sold on the open market. I'm not sure. I think there's still the markets being developed for this, so it's all very early days for this sort of stuff. So we have to wait for more to come. And also, minting NFTs at the moment is quite painful. It was via command prompt before and very clunky, but now we have a few things being developed, which is pretty cool. Like, for example, this Ordinals bot allows you to just drag an image in here and an address to receive it to, and basically you just select your Satoshis. But as you can see, the fees are like pretty low these days, so it's pretty good. But yeah, just keep in mind this is alpha software, so be careful, I suppose, with regards to all this stuff. But yeah, this is the Ordinals page. This is basically showing all of the Ordinals NFT transactions, and there is an Ord wallet as well for this. So this is a bit different to the Orbi one. The Astral Babes uses the Orbi wallet, so if you want to participate in this particular one, then you'd be using the Orbi wallet for that. So you can either send Bitcoin from your own wallet to the wallet address that they supply, or you can buy Bitcoin using, say, something like MoonPay. So for example, this is what MoonPay looks like, and you can just go through and buy however much you want. 250 is what I sent to it, but I send that from my own personal wallet. But this is one way to do it. It does take quite a while though, so you know, a bit anxiety inducing when you're waiting 4 hours for a transaction to go through, especially if you're like me and used to Solana being instant. But this is basically one way to top up your wallet or just receive straight. And then once you've received it, you can participate in some of these upcoming NFT mints. I will be minting one of these as soon as they're available. They're at $60 US, I'm pretty sure, at the moment, which isn't too bad for an NFT mint. I feel like there's a good chance that there will be, and this is not financial advice obviously, but there's a good chance that this will do fairly well because it is the first to hit the market using the Orbi wallet, which, you know, I think the user experience is pretty good with the Orbi wallet. It's not the best. It's not as good as, for example, your Phantom, for example, which obviously is my favorite by far, but it's definitely worth checking out some of these other things. I'm going to be keeping an eye on this particular page because I would love to see some DeFi stuff come to the Bitcoin blockchain via Lightning, and there'll be other wallets, and so I'm not sure which one will sort of gain main market share, so to speak, but I think the Orbi one's pretty good. I guess it's still being built out. It's very early days, so just keep that in mind. But I'll be definitely watching these guys to see what happens going forward, and also keeping an eye on this bot too. I would love to mint some NFTs to the Bitcoin blockchain. It would be pretty cool. I'll leave a link to this Twitter page here, which is the page for the minting bot, because this is probably a good one to watch, I would say, because it's a gateway to adoption, as well as the Astral Babes. I'll leave a link to that below as well. Another website worth checking out is rareordinals.art, and this basically is showing us a bunch of the ordinal based NFTs that have been minted to the Bitcoin chain. I think this is the stuff that's a bit more of significance. Het Rock. Someone's trolling with this one, that's for sure. This is our friend cryptocurrency, the pet rock. And yeah, nosft.xyz is the other site, which is not working for me here. It works on my other computer. I'm connected to it at the moment. So it works over here, but not here for some reason. I don't really care because I don't really use this computer so much for doing this stuff. But anyway, it's going to be really interesting watching the developments. I can see both sides of the argument. I can see the Maxi side kind of wanting to keep Bitcoin to transactions and being store of value and just for financial transactions. But like any technology, it's going to develop, and it's better to move with it rather than trying to stand in its way, because it's like a tidal wave. It's just going to go around you and leave you behind. Actually, tidal wave will probably sweep you away, but maybe it'll sweep the Maxis away. I'm not really sure, but I see both sides. I see that side, and I guess me being a bit more progressive with regards to technology development, I see this as a big plus, and I see this as being a bullish catalyst for the NFT market. And I was just saying earlier on, I think rising tides, floating boats. If there is a big uptick and spike in Bitcoin NFTs, then I think that will bring a fresh wave of users into the other NFT chains as a high possibility. But nevertheless, it's definitely a space to watch. So I hope you learned something helpful from this video. If so, please leave me a like, comment. I would greatly appreciate it. And a subscription would be swell too. And please also check out my Instagram if you want to check out some of my digital art for the NFT collection that I am currently rolling out. But these things take me hours to make. So I'm going to keep making my NFTs, which is probably one of the reasons why I haven't made so many videos lately. Also, the market's been kind of going sideways. I'll cover a bit more with regards to my market analysis soon. I've been updating my Twitter when things are relevant. For example, with the ETH trade, the ETH long, when I said to take profit, was actually the local top, which is really good. So the entry was pretty far down, and the profit point, the first profit point, was at the local top that we just had. Now we've been going sideways for the last week and a bit. So I guess if you wanted to stay up to date with that, probably Twitter was the best one for it. Now we're just waiting to see where to next. But I will cover market update stuff in a future video when I feel like it's probably more relevant, because yeah, I guess we're just kind of sitting on our hands at the moment. February is usually a pretty boring month if January is an exciting one. So yeah, we can probably relax for a little bit for the rest of the month and just see how things play out. But anyway, NFTs, Bitcoin, NFT bull run, buzzwords. Have a good one. Take it easy. All the best. It's Kryptolytix signing out. Catch you later. Peace.